and hearings for Palmerston North City Council. Before we get into the meeting proper, we're going to start by going through the health and safety for this evening's proceedings. Please just direct your eyes to the screens in front of you and have a look at the health and safety information available. And for your information, this meeting is being live streamed to the Council's YouTube channel. Firstly, we'll start by calling for apologies. I have apologies from... Apologies, officers. Apologies from Councillor Meehan for... Well, Councillor Meehan and Councillor Mickled, and apologies from Mayor Smith for early departure. No, he's shaking his head. We'll cross that off. Just apologies from Councillor Meehan and Councillor Mickled. Anything else, councillors? No, I'll move that. Seconded by Councillor Hancock. And we will vote. Just bear with us a moment. That has passed, 14 votes for and none against. We'll now just note any declarations of interest. I believe Councillor Hapata. Is there a list? It's on the table. Sarah, can we put Leonie on? Just give us a moment, Leonie. I can't say. Try now.
Is it going now?
Yes, we can hear you.
I just want a conflict for, an interest in submitter 1002. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hapata. That's noted. All right, and with that, we'll now move into submissions. Those of you who are here for the first time today, submissions will be 10 minutes. Within that time, also, there's an opportunity for councillors to ask you questions. You may use your 10 minutes how you wish, but please note we'll be running strictly to time, so once you get to 10 minutes, I will be asking you to come to your closing remarks. With that, our first submitter tonight is submission 339, Peter and Isabel Wilson. You're welcome to come to the table and present. And if you just push the right-hand button to turn your microphones on. Yes? Oh, yeah.
Tēnā koutou katoa. We want to thank the Council for the opportunity to speak to our submission. I won't be going through it in detail. I'm going to bring a number of perspectives to complement that submission. I want to start by saying what we said last year when we came to speak to Council about the rates, and that is that we have no problem paying rates, and we have no problem that it's a differential based on some valuation criteria. What we do have a problem with is a system that is not fair in allocating that differential. The present land value system is demonstrably unfair, as we put in our submission last year and which we put in our submission this year. The hybrid system, which is proposed by Council, substantially, in our view, fails to actually adequately address the unfairness and inequity that exists already, because it remains about roughly 70% inequitable and unfair. There's really only one fair system, and that is the capital value system, and that's what we're here to advocate for tonight. So I'm going to make a few comments about, based on the pamphlet, the letter that was sent to ratepayers, and the material in the council's website relating to the submission on rates. We see no substantive or compelling reason in those papers not to adopt a capital value system. Collectively, there are more pros for the CV system than for the hybrid system, and there are fewer cons. Council, by my reading, our reading, was unable to really provide substantial justification for preferring a hybrid option. In fact, the nearest I could get to it was this quote, and that is, "The hybrid option would limit the extent of change experienced by the most adversely impacted ratepayers." At discussion time, I'm prepared to be corrected on that, but that's the most substantial reason that we can find. And I would want to address that impact question with some thoroughness. And we can do so with authority and experience because we've been subject to the adverse impact that is described here for a long period of time. At the last rates assessment, our impact was a 51% increase. Most people in Palmerston North had, as I understand it, around about a 5.6% increase. So we were impacted in a proportional basis almost 10 times what the average was impacted. And we are not the most seriously impacted members or ratepayers. We want to be clear that a change to a CV system is going to mean that there will be significant increases. The really significant increases will be a small number. But the number, I don't think, is the point. We believe that the key issue is one of fairness and equity, and I'll come back to that point a little bit later. A significant number, of course, will also experience a reduction in their rates. So there will be a balance. It's not about winners and losers, in our view. It's about doing the right thing and having a fair and reasonable system. Citing impact as a reason for not adopting a CV option, in our opinion, is an indefensible argument because it lacks justice, fairness, and consistency. And I just want to focus a little bit on the word consistency. Council, by perpetuating with, or persisting rather, with the LV system, has persisted with a system that unfairly, adversely affects a significant proportion of ratepayers, and some of them very significantly, such as ourselves, who at the last round had a rates increase greater than a large number of property ratepayers in the city actually pay for their rates in total. Council was happy for us and others impacted in that sense, yet from the reasoning suggests that Council would be unhappy to have similar impacts imposed on others, despite the fact that a new system, a CV system, would have the virtues of fairness and equity. The increase in the rates under CV will mostly be less than those experienced by a number of us in the last round, which based on land value in 2023 and 24. It's been suggested that a change to CV could be phased in. Therefore, on an annual basis, if it was phased in over 3 years, that impact, that adverse impact, as it was called, is going to pale to insignificance compared to what we experienced under the old system. It's a graduated process. It will progressively go to a significant figure, but on an annual basis, it's phased in, and we can see the rationale for that. We can see the pragmatism in that, and I'll come back in my concluding comments. We need to be sure that we all understand that this change is a recalibration, and the recalibration is a one-off if it's done properly. If it's not done properly, in other words, if it's not fully fair, then the recalibration will need to happen again and again, because we know through history that injustices persist and people have a sense of justice and it won't die. We've been told by council sources that there's an encouragement for owners of large properties to subdivide, and that rates will help prompt the tendency to subdivide. In our situation, we don't believe that's going to make any difference, or it'll make very little difference, because our rates, while they're still going to be high, don't get me wrong, I'm not expecting our rates to drop down to the bottom. We still understand that we're going to be paying high rates relative to most in the city. But 92% of our rates on a capital value system will be land value. They'll still be land value. So if an incentive to subdivide is wanted, it still persists, at least for us, and I'm sure it will for a lot of other people, a lot of ratepayers. Mention is made of the impact on the commercial sector. We believe that good decision making should treat all sectors of society equally and equitably. There are ways and means that the commercial sector issues can be dealt with that don't necessarily have to impact on the residential sector. Another thing that we didn't see in the documentation is the fact that commercial businesses have the opportunity to pass on costs. That's been standard practice through millennia. It's well practiced by a large sector of the commercial interest in Palmerston North, which is the rental sector. Landlords are well known, and they justify to the rest of society that those costs can be passed on. It's not right for council to be bringing in systems that protect one sector of the community but not other sectors. And I go back to the comment I made before, we want to be treated equally and equitably. I've just got a few bullet points to conclude. We believe from our written submission and this that there are objective and compelling reasons why CV is the most appropriate option. It's because it's the only one that fully fulfills the principles of fairness, justice, and equity. The 2019 data show that 71% of councils throughout the country have a CV system. That data is 5 years old now, and I haven't been able to find updated data, but it would surprise me greatly if that figure was less than it is. It would not surprise me if it is now more than it is. And we would like to see Palmerston North joining that majority. We would prefer,
I'd ask you to come to your closing remarks if you could.
Yes, thank you. We would prefer, obviously, to have the implementation of a CV system brought in immediately, but we do accept the pragmatism of a phased-in system. We would have liked the privilege of having a phased-in system of the expensive rates increases that we've experienced. The difference in impact between what we've experienced to date and what ratepayers will experience after adoption of a CV is that it's based on a fair system, not an unfair system.
Thank you, Peter. Unfortunately, that's all we've got time for today.
We want to leave this comment, which is, why should council replace a 100% fair system with a 100% unfair system with a 70% unfair system in favour of a 100% fair system? We hope that our faith in council to make the right decision is justified. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you for your submission. It will be considered alongside all others on the 29th and 30th of May in our deliberations. Thank you. I'll now call submission 1002, Sam Eiling. to come present your submission. And just a reminder, Sam, your 10 minutes also takes into account time for questions.
You say press this. No, it's on. All right, kia ora tātou. Kia ora, Chairman of the Board and councillors, thank you for your time and thank you for going through this essential democratic process. I imagine many of the submissions are getting fairly repetitive, so I'll try and be brief. I won't go over my written submission as you've had a chance to read that, but I would summarise my submission as we need to focus on essentials and not luxuries, and needs and not wants. As a local GP, I'm connected to many refugee and high deprivation patients. We're seeing the financial struggle at the moment. The community is under a lot of pressure, and the cost of living is high. People are struggling to pay for food, for housing and health-related costs. Every dollar the council spends has to come from a taxpayer, which then ultimately comes and creates more pressure on communities. Even if rates are applied to businesses or investors, the cost ultimately has to be borne by the end consumer. The proposed rates increases will ultimately lead to increased rent and service costs, and for some people that may be the difference between being able to run the heater during the winter, to be able to buy healthier food or afford their medical care. Ultimately, I recognise rates do need to increase to cover the costs of the services council provides, particularly some of the big projects coming up, water infrastructure must be done. I recognise that debt, though, is not the solution. At best, borrowing is kicking the can down the road, and at worst it is leaving the next generation with a bill for our current spending, although we will obviously have to have some increase in debt for some of the big projects. But I would ask the council to seriously review all spending and assess whether it's essential and cut all non-essential spending that's possible. Rates will have to increase, but would ask you to manage to reduce that as much as possible, and while not putting future citizens into further debt and expense. That's all I'd prepared to say. So, yeah.
Thank you, Sam. Very brief. Appreciate it. We'll now move to questions from Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Sam, for your submission. I'm going to ask you the same question I asked an earlier submitter today. We've had people coming in talking about, needs, not wants.
Okay.
But my perception is that things that each submitter would like us to do become needs, and things that other submitters would like us to do become wants. So can you give us any kind of definition from your perspective of needs versus wants?
Yeah, well, that is obviously very subjective and very hard. Obviously, the core business of council, roading, water, infrastructure that can't be provided by any other community organisation, any other group, and so first those have to be provided by council. In terms of, at the moment, I'd highlight projects, for example, I've heard a lot of concern from business people I know on Broadway who are worried about the project they're affecting their ability to run their stores, and that, although beautification of the street may be nice, I wouldn't see that as an essential project at the moment. In terms of the projects that were specifically being mentioned on in the long-term plan, in my submission I responded to those, but the Awapuni Community Hub and Library, spending $27 million there seems to be a very large expense that I'd consider more a luxury at this point. The Central Trust Arena, spending $36 million on that, as I mentioned in my submission. If that was ring-fenced to income that may be generated from the arena, I'd support that, but if that, I wouldn't necessarily support the entire project, although I don't know all the details. The Te Motu or Portua project, as I said in my submission, I'd agree with the council funding the road up to it. That's generally the council's role, but I wouldn't necessarily agree with the $10 million contribution to the individual development, again, not having potentially all the details. So I'm not necessarily able to say what projects exactly should be done, but I just really encourage fiscal responsibility on all
Okay.
considerations.
So is your primary concern the level of rates or the level of debt?
Well, I mean, it's both. Any debt we spend now has to be paid back eventually. So the amount, whether we put up rates now or 5 years later, someone's going to have to pay for it. So if we can minimise spending, that will help. However, whenever that chickens come home to roost, so to speak.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Naylor.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. My question was a little bit similar to Councillor Johnson's. I was just really interested in understanding more about what you consider non-essential spending. And thank you for outlining the things that you have identified in the submission. But in particular, we've had some submissions asking for us to double our contribution to community groups, and also we've had a bit of commentary around social housing. I just would be interested if you have a view about whether those things are essential or non-essential.
I mean, again, not knowing exact details would be hard. There are certain community groups that potentially should get some government funding. At the same time, there are charities for reasons people can donate money to community groups, and if a community group has enough importance, usually there will be people willing to donate and support that, and is a lot of funding that can come through things like the lotteries grants, through the pub charities grants that can support various different community groups. It doesn't necessarily need to be through ratepayers funding that. So in terms of community groups, I'd be asking, could the community that they're a part of be willing to fund that? It would be the first question, and if their community is not willing to fund it, why should other people be forced to fund that? That would be. Okay.
And the other one, community events, is that non-essential or is that essential?
Yeah, again, I guess everything is on a spectrum. We don't want to be a completely utilitarian society with no culture and no personality, but we also don't want to enslave people to debt in the future, or spend beyond our means, and also spending is always nice at the time, but it has to be paid eventually. So if we're putting up rates, spending money, that then means that people that are paying rates, as I said, can't necessarily afford housing, heating, leads to overcrowding. That also has negative health and societal impacts. So
thank you, Sam. Appreciate your comments.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you. Thanks, Sam, for allowing some time for questions. Was just interested in some of your commentary around transport, and one of the things that you alluded to there was wanting to ensure that there's car parks within walking distance of destinations, and I just wanted to get your assessment of what walking distance means.
It's going to be different for different people. Obviously, people with disabilities, they may need much shorter distances to walk. From my perspective, we have 4 children. Going into town is a bit more challenging if there's no parking, and community transport, public transport's not an option for us. We live out of town, and when we were living in town, catching a bus is a bit more logistically difficult with children. So walking distance, in a city that's frequently wet and windy and rainy, 500 metres might be an appropriate sort of distance, but beyond that starts to get likely that people are going to think twice about going out.
Great, thanks. And can't resist getting drawn into the debt debate after having some questions about it. I'd be interested to know how you feel about New Zealand's overall debt being one of the lowest in the OECD.
I'm not sure if that is that including all private and government debt. I didn't think we were quite at one of the lowest, to be honest. But
so I take from that response that you'd want to have an inclusive view of debt that was not just public debt, but also privately held debt.
I'm not an economist, but I would be more likely to consider that a more holistic view of the economy.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, councillors. As we've only got 15 seconds left, I think we'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Sam, for your submission. That'll be considered alongside all others in our deliberations at the end of May.
Thank you everyone for your time and your work.
I'd now like to welcome submission 1060, Aaron Fox, to come present.
Good evening. My name's Aaron, surname Fox, and I live in Bunnythorpe, so make of that what you will, foxes and bunnies. So my first point this evening is that I found that the LTP represents poor process. The consultation document, when I looked through it, struck me as being back to front. You led with the small questions: community facilities, centre city transformation, earthquake strengthening, the stadium, any of which could in fact be delayed until the next LTP in 3 years' time. The big questions are at the back: transport projects, nature calls, housing, growth. These are the big ticket items in the plan with the greatest costs in terms of money, assets and quality of life. Our money, our land. Any and all discussions of council plans, priorities and spendings for the next 3 to 10 years must really focus on these issues. As I said in my submission, community facilities and seismic work can wait. Let the next council address these in the next 10-year plan. I'm also concerned at the presentation of the document. Some of the issues in the LTP are subject to a separate truncated consultation process, particularly the future growth strategy. We were here on Monday discussing that. How can you consult on something when the preparatory consultation is still in process? Why, in fact, was something of this magnitude not subject to a special consultative procedure? The significant scale, cost and impact of proposed future development, with plans for roading and industrial rezoning, should automatically have triggered community consultation and engagement at the outset. Realistically, how can anyone provide feedback on something which remains under discussion? Simply not good enough. If the issue is uncertain, if it is undecided or irrelevant, don't consult on it as part of this LTP round. Those issues can keep. I'm concerned the plan isn't coherent. Just like the future development plan, I find the LTP is an assemblage of bits. Community here, buildings there, development costs and rating systems in the middle. I don't see an overarching appreciation of what our city, our community, actually needs in the coming 3 years, nor what we can as a city actually afford. And my second point is that it is a tough world out there. People are worried about their incomes, their mortgages and the price of everything. Our ageing population, asset rich, cash poor. When you pay for something or you're rated for it, you need to know that you're receiving value for money or a good investment. Today is not the time to consider luxuries or to think big. We need our basic services delivered cost effectively and well. Our water, our waste, our roads, street lighting. I, for one, am tired of worrying if it's safe to drink the water or wash our clothes, or if the sewerage and stormwater will fail again when it rains heavily. When might we lose more car tyres and wheel rims to potholes? My family's lost 2 since we moved to Palmerston North 6 years ago. The Prime Minister today talked about the best possible outcome for the monies the government collects and that taxpayers deserve to be treated with respect. The same holds for us, your ratepayers. I don't want to be forced to pay for projects or plans which are not essential. Nature calls, yes, please focus on that. That is an intergenerational project. It's vital, and it can only get more essential and expensive. We don't get onto it now. But not roading and bridges to the northeast at a cost of, $39 million, supporting industrial growth, which won't happen in the next 3 years, might even happen at all. Remember that we're in a time of declining productivity and increased unemployment. Our Prime Minister again today made reference to New Zealand's squeezed middle, struggling with the cost of living. So, reduce a rural discount for rates when essential services aren't being delivered to rural communities? No. Separate targeted rates for essential infrastructure such as nature calls? No. The only possible justification, from my perspective, to increase rates in this LTP cycle must be the essential upgrading of our Three Waters network. Got to sort our poo out. Which brings me to my third point of costs. It's not about money, it's not just about money, although that's uppermost in the mind of anyone doing a household shop or filling up a fuel tank. It's about the cost to the community, or rather the multitude of communities, the cost that they are capable of bearing. It's about the infrastructure and resources within the city, what to maintain, what to build, and what to let go. It's about the private landowner, the small business owner, civil servants, and our young people. I can't see their needs and wants reflected in this plan. I've looked. What are the rewards for living in Palmerston North? I'm going to repeat myself from Monday and talk a little about a future development strategy, which is redefining who owns or controls private property. Your plans to rezone areas to the northeast, redefine and reduce individual property rights within and around Bunnythorpe. Your planners recommend that the greater economic good for Palmerston North should trump permanent and absolute ownership of land. Te o Tanganui, or the PNITI, might never be realised, but in the meantime, if you rezone areas on maps and denote freight hubs, industrial zones or freight roads, that in practice denies private property owners the freedom to realise the full potential or value of their land. As a submitter put it earlier in the week, to be rezoned from highly productive land to industrial is to live on death row. Which leads me to my fourth and last point. What is the value of trust? Council's preferred system of at-large representation has not served my community well out in Bunnythorpe. Many of us have opposed KiwiRail's freight hub proposal for the last 4.5 years. Then there have been passing references to a major freight road, and now Te o Tanganui. It's a master plan built on the conceit that Palmerston North's collective greater good is only best served if our community is industrialised. No one ever came out of one of those closed workshops or confidential committees to ask us if it was a good idea. So, 3 years ago, I submitted on behalf of our local ratepayers a proposal for the Greater Bunnythorpe Community and Committee. No one from our community spoke at the council meeting. We had no speaking rights when our application was voted down. So I've said in my submission, we appealed to the Local Government Commission, and their determination is part of my submission. They recommend that a Bunnythorpe Community Committee be established with formal terms of reference and the support of the council. The Commission has also recommended that a village master plan exercise be undertaken. In truth, this has been talked about. It's been on your books since 2015, at least. And they further recommended that the council should encourage KiwiRail, Waka Kotahi and New Zealand Post to liaise with our community. So here I am tonight to talk to you directly about participatory democracy in Bunnythorpe. It's my first opportunity since 2021 to talk to you all. I'm asking that you please agree to a formal agreement between what is now the Greater Bunnythorpe Committee and Palmerston North City. Big decisions for Bunnythorpe should never have been left to city planners, in-house workshops or master plans, all of which excluded our community voice. So much planned for us using our land and our rates. Henceforth, please let my community take an active part in proposals, discussions, plans, designs, and above all decisions when these directly affect where we live, work and play. Equally, whenever the council meets with KiwiRail or Waka Kotahi to discuss Bunnythorpe, our community needs to be in that room with you. Better still, bring the officials with you to Bunnythorpe. Come and meet us on our turf. See for yourselves the very land which everyone else wants to cover in concrete and tar seal. So the village plan is an excellent idea, but not in isolation. Start with Bunnythorpe, but please share that concept across the city. Community developed plans for Bunnythorpe and other villages and neighbourhoods should be the first step for any long-term vision for the city. Start by asking what your communities want well in advance. Don't repeat the fatally flawed technique of assume, plan and eventually consult. That's got Bunnythorpe where it is today, with many landowners fearing for the future secure possession of their properties, me and my family included. Instead, please ask first. Be prepared to debate, to compromise, to prioritise and to agree. That work done, then and only then can we start to plan, as we're doing here today. So here is where the trust is built. Ensure that people, their opinions, their hopes, their fears, their aspirations can together make a community and make it strong. Let's not assume, let's find out. Now, if we can achieve that for Bunnythorpe and across Palmerston North in the coming 3 to 10 years, I know that then we can together dare to build the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. We have time for one quick question from the Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Aaron. 2 in 1 week. So, and thank you for your thorough submission. I'd have to say though, it sounds pretty depressing. Is there anything council's doing right?
I say on an operational level, on a day-to-day business, and the councillors and the staff who come out to Bunnythorpe for our meetings, that's working very well. You know, some of our immediate needs are being met. It's just the future that's not happening, but immediate needs, brilliant. More
Okay.
of that, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Aaron. That's all the time we've got tonight. Thank you for your submission. It will be considered alongside all of our others in our May deliberations at the end of the month. I'd now like to welcome submitter 1074, the Palmerston North Surf Lifesaving Club, Alec Mackay.
I think I also had some slides, I think. Can they be put up? Thank you.
Our team is saying unfortunately we haven't received any. But if you
right.
could send those through to us, we'll get those circulated to all elected members after this
Oh,
meeting.
sorry, I did actually send them through, so. Sorry, look,
The team's apologising.
again, I'll check that to come through. I've got some hard copies if that's useful to
That would be great
circulate.
if you want to circulate those
Yeah,
before you
that
speak.
was
You're more than
what I
welcome to.
planned to. Thank you. I'll start, look, first, thank you and good evening. Alec Mackay, Chair of the Surf Club, and Kate Dench is our Treasurer. So I'll do a little presentation. If you've got any questions, Kate's more than happy to take them. Hamatangi Beach is actually Palmerston North Beach. It's the closest beach to the city here. So, and the Palmerston North Surf Lifesaving Club, as an incorporated society and registered charity, have been providing a volunteer service out at Hamatangi Beach since 1947, every year. And we celebrated 75 years last year after a couple of attempts through the COVID period. In addition to providing that volunteer service, to be able to provide that service, we actually effectively have to train our lifeguards for that purpose. So you'll see in the stats there, I've just put some numbers there. We aim at sort of trying to qualify 5 to 10 lifeguards every year so that we can actually provide that service. And then there's patrol captain, there's IB drivers, there's crewmen, and there's a whole lot of other people. But so a big part of the surf club is about just building capability to be able to provide that service. In addition to the volunteer service we provide every weekend from the start of December through to March every year, so that's every Saturday and Sunday, there's what we call a regional paid lifeguard service that runs Monday to Friday from mid-February through to the end of January. And that's really to capture that really busy period, mid-December through to the end of January. That's that busy period when holidays are around and people are on the beach during the week. And that's been jointly funded for quite a few years now by the Palmerston North City Council and the Manawatu District Council. And that involves employing 3 lifeguards working from 12 to 6 over that 6-week period. And so the cost of that is approximately $30,000 a year. And that's shared equally between the 2 councils, $15,000 each. And the surf club provides the facilities and the equipment for that purpose, which is IRBs, a tower, vehicle, all the way down to tubes, digital radios, which is not an insignificant cost to actually keep up. So what we came here tonight is firstly to say we'd like to thank you for the support we have received in the past. We'd like to thank you for including us in the first year of the LTP. What we'd like to see is if we could get that extended out to 3 years, not for 1 year, but for the next 3 years, to provide greater certainty. Also then aligns with the support from the Manawatu District Council in terms of their support for the surf club. And also, again, greater certainty for planning. And also, those guards are employed through Surf Lifesaving New Zealand. Then there's greater certainty around organising capabilities and equipment that goes around that service into the future. I provided to you on a slide there just the regional paid guard stats for about the last 10 years. If you go to the bottom line, over that 10-year period, 64 people have been rescued, 20 first aids, and these are where you get ambulances and helicopters and such. And searches, it's interesting, don't do many searches now, and I think that probably the cell phone solve that problem. They can find the kids. But probably these last 2 columns are the important one. Over 5,000 preventive actions involving close to 25,000 people. Our goal is not to do a rescue. Our goal is to prevent a rescue, not to have to do it, but to actually get to people before they get to that position. So the guards spend more time trying to prevent that happening, and that's to make our beach safer. We can't make it safe, we make it slightly safer. And I suppose a lot of that is around just educating people. So the lifeguards will be communicating with people on the beach all day long. We do more and more first aids. And in fact, if you go back to the Surf Life Saving stats, 75% of all first aids are terrestrial based. We do very little, actually, first aids as a result of people with trouble in the water. And it's an area where it's an increasing area around, obviously, people having heart attacks, strokes, asthmatic attacks. Because the beach is also a gazetted road, we actually do a lot of road accidents and people falling off things, being run over by things. So that's actually quite an important increasing service. So look, that's really just a snapshot, and really wanted to just provide a bit of time for questions from councillors.
Thank you very much. We'll go to a question first from Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Alec. Very supportive of your service. Thank you. As I recall, and correct me if I'm wrong, but when you came to us last time to request funding, I thought we put in funding to tide you over to the next round of strategic priority grant applications, and that's why it's only in the plan for 1 year. Was that your recollection as well?
Yes, that is correct. But as part of that at the time, it was suggested that we do also make a submission to the LTPs. So that's why we may be crossing over, but we also want to get into the long-term plan so that we don't have the other one.
Okay.
Yeah, this is where we'd rather be in the long-term planning.
So you understand that the strategic priority grants are for a 3-year period if they're granted?
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
We do. Yes, we do understand that. Yeah.
Okay. So is it that you don't want to go into a competitive process with every other community group? You want your own funding line in the plan?
Yes, that is what we would like out of this process, is that we are in the long-term plan. Yeah.
Okay, I understand.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bowen, were you still wanting to ask a question? Excellent.
Thank you.
Councillor Barron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you both. It would be helpful for me if we could understand what MDC's process is around the 15,000. Does that sit in a year-to-year competitive, or is that an actual line item in the LTP?
And again, I might get this wrong, but it's a competitive process. So they do have a community funding, and we've having sort of the same conversation. We would like to see us to put into a position where we're not in a sort of a competitive model.
Great. And so oh, go ahead.
It's and it's a 3-year funding. Yeah,
Okay.
so it's a 3-year funding.
And is that funding decision made by officers or by the elected members? Do you know?
Pass.
Pass. We're
Yeah.
rather
No, we can check on that, but just trying to get the context. Thank you.
look, happy to go and get that information for you.
Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just in regards, can I just confirm, I heard 15,000 from the district. Can I just confirm that's the arrangement that you're proposing is 15 from the city? And
We currently have 15 from the Manawatu District Council, and the Palmerston North City Council, we were given slightly more than that. I think it was 16,135.
Okay.
something
Inflation
like that.
adjusted.
Yeah, so yes, because the program this year cost 31,000 for the
Okay.
current season.
That's helpful. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for coming in and submitting. That's all the questions we have for you today. Really appreciate your submission. It will be considered alongside all others in our deliberations at the end of the month. I'd now like to welcome submitter 1158, Stuart Hubbard. Thank you, Stuart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mayor, councillors, for hearing my submission. I'm coming from the from the sort of position of being somebody who cycles to work, a commuting cyclist, and also a recreational cyclist. And first, I'd just like to congratulate the council on all they've done towards continuing to make the streets safer for cyclists. We've still got a way to go, but we are working with a road network that was largely designed many years ago before cycling as a serious mode of transport was really a thing. And I'd also like to congratulate the council on the efforts that have been made to open up pathways to the river, the shared pathway to Linton, for example, and also obviously the riverbank pathways. And what I really wanted to speak to tonight was just just to advocate for the continuation of the work on the shared pathway to Ashurst. From at the moment, the riverbank pathway stops at Riverside Road, then continues along Tomato Road, but then that's it. That's no more access to the river until Raukawa Road. So I believe that that access to the river would be of benefit both to residents of Palmerston North and also to visitors to the area. But I'm also aware of what Councillor Johnson said, talking about wants and needs, and I've also advocated in my submission for I consider the Three Waters project very important. Nature calls. Obviously, we've got to dispose of wastewater effectively rather than continuing to discharge into the river. So it's a balancing act. There's a lot of things to spend money on, and I guess one of the things I don't really understand is why this project is stalled. I know it's to do with access. There's two landowners involved, and I'm not really quite sure why it can't be sort of wrapped up in the shorter term, maybe, rather than becoming a long-term plan project. That's it from me. Open to questions.
Thank you, Stuart. Councillors, have we got any questions? Doesn't look like it. A very clear and concise submission. Thank you very much for your time. I'll just ask if Malcolm Frith is here. Thank you, Malcolm. So I'll now welcome submitter number 1160, Malcolm, to come give their presentation. If you just push that right-hand button to turn your microphone on.
You've got a new system here since I was last here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, councillors, for the opportunity to speak. I'd just like to start off. There was, I take it you've all read my submission. And for me and my mother, there literally is no more money to cover increasing costs. And I think that would be a fair saying for a lot of people right now. There was a gentleman called Solomon many years ago. He's recorded in the Bible. And at that time, like today, there was many issues going on. So he asked his God for wisdom, not for knowledge, but for wisdom. And he became known throughout the world as the wisest man. And from his wisdom, his wealth grew. So we know where his priorities lay. I think we need to seriously ask God for wisdom for this city. There's only, from old sayings to me as a child, when in the 60s and the 70s, when a lot of people look back, it was a good time. There wasn't a lot of money, but there was growth in the country. The government invested in the country, and so did other people who had businesses, because they could afford to. Growth is not about consumption and spending vast amounts of money on certain projects. There's a saying also which says, less haste, less waste. We seem today to always be in a hurry to get rid of the old for the new, yet we never consider the cost of that. There's many strange things going on in the city, which again refers to my last statement. I've seen a perfectly good footpath just over the bridge in Railway Road, ripped up. It was a bitumen footpath ripped up and replaced with a concrete one. How bizarre. Apparently, I've heard the same thing has happened down in Pioneer Highway. Yet we have footpaths that are falling apart in the city that don't get and haven't been repaired for over 30, 40 years. And I can show you these if you're interested. And yet we're ripping up perfectly good ones. There's also talk, as the last gentleman was talking about, putting in cycleways and the cycle network. Yet a lot of people actually don't know what this is about. Why? I ask myself. So basically you're putting people against other people when someone sees a dedicated cycleway, yet their own footpath outside their home is falling apart. That's quite concerning. I believe the systems in the city are falling apart as well, and they're failing to work. There's things like impractical bus shelters we've seen erected. Again, all flash and new. Yet the backside, which i.e. the taxpayer or the ratepayer is paying for, you can't see, yet there's actually a bit of artwork on it. There's also lights in these new bus shelters. But to my mind, it's actually quite a waste of money when we already had practical bus shelters before. I have mentioned before about consistency in the city, and there's a lot, and still is a lot of inconsistencies in and around how things are carried out in the city. We have many unclean streets, as people have been complaining, sumps which are full to the brim, again, which haven't been maintained for many years. We have roads that are falling apart, with various excuses why this is happening. The staff, I'm afraid, there are really good staff in the council, but then there are others that just don't listen. When you challenge them or want to ask them a question, and this is my own personal experience, they simply run away or walk away and get into their car, in truth. This again comes back to the fact of why the city is not working. So I would like to suggest some solutions. Take away some of the contractors and bring back our council staff. They used to have pride in this city. If you talk to some of the old staff members, they used to work at between midnight. I know one gentleman, he was my friend's father, and he used to sweep all the streets around the square. He was really proud to be a city council worker. Then that's what we need. Pride in our workers here in this city rather than contractors who simply want to get the job done, put the account in and get paid. So we could also bring back the public. For example, on Florence Avenue, our street is full of hospital workers' cars, which is an ongoing issue, but it's also a major issue when it comes to sweeping the street. So why not offer people a discount on their rates if they commit to sweeping their part of the street? Because the contractor cannot access the gutter. I've requested on numerous occasions, plus other residents in the street, that they come on the weekend when there's less cars. But this just falls on deaf ears. We also currently have a penalty system for ratepayers. We contribute X amount of dollars every fortnight into the council coffers, yet my mother, who is the owner of the property, cops a penalty. I think this is quite immoral, actually, when there's already a payment system set up for contributing to the rates, agreed to, and because of whatever reason, she is penalised. And I personally believe the council is using this as a mechanism to gain more money. That's my own personal belief. There are other avenues which we could involve the corrections department more. For example, the proposal to build the new connecting footpath along Railway Road to Bunnythorpe. Why not give this to the prison team? They are through the pit park. I've seen these guys work like Trojans and they achieve a lot in a day and they do a damn good job. So why not give them the contract to do it? They will do it for the cost of the materials and there's a small fee each day. I'd also like to see a new department set up in this city. One that enables community feedback. In other words, someone could come along, talk to a member of staff, have their concerns listened to, noted, and it goes into the system. Instead of getting a shutdown from the staff, which I've received when I'm trying to raise an issue, and also other members of the public I've heard of as well have encountered the same issue. One was actually around the concrete path going around the new bus shelters. There was a suggestion to put the direction of the path on an angle so it would enable people to walk around instead of a 90-degree angle, a 45-degree angle. This apparently was shut down by the staff member who the public was talking to. We have, as the last gentleman said, major costs involving our water system, and what I would like, I fully support the replacement and upgrade of the system, but one of the areas that this could be funded is to sell 50% of the airport shares to raise the money. This money could also be helped towards the program of providing social housing. I take it that's the total time up there. Thank you.
Thank you, Malcolm. We've got time for a few questions. Councillor Naylor. Oh, you've put yourself out. Give me a moment.
Thanks, Malcolm. You've made a comment on the second page of your written submission about you want the city to stop borrowing vast sums of money for nice-to-have projects.
Yes.
And I'm just wondering if you're able to expand on what you consider nice-to-have projects.
Well, for example, these streetscapes that are changing, just outside the old post office building, that's one that's been programmed in. Currently, the current streetscape is really nice, except it does need maintenance. You could simply take out the bitumen and put in some nice pavers instead of actually ripping the whole road up, removing the trees, putting in nice edging, etc. So they could be downscaled but still have the same effect. It was mentioned also about upgrading Broadway. There's actually really nothing awfully wrong with Broadway, but it needs the investment of the shop owners and building owners, and it also needs the maintenance done on the pavers. They haven't been relaid since the issue with the large trees that were removed some years ago. There's also part of the
closing remarks, Malcolm, if you could.
Sorry?
I'll ask you to come to your closing remarks if you could.
Thank you. Yeah, well, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your
Thanks.
time coming to speak to us today. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you.
We'll now move on to our next submission, but yours will be considered alongside all others in our deliberations at the end of May.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
I'll now ask submitter number 1168, Jeff Cruikshank, to come and present. No stranger to the chamber, Jeff, so welcome.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair, Mayor, Deputy Mayor and fellow councillors. Thank you for allowing me to come to speak this evening, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity. I'm not going to speak for too long so that you can have plenty of time to grill me with some questions, but obviously I want to speak into a couple of areas that I'm quite passionate about. And before I go into that, I'd just like to preface that by saying I am pro-investment, although my submission might not quite read that way, but I'm key on pro-investment in the right areas, and I think there has been a general theme tonight around making sure around the nice-to-haves versus the must-haves. And some of these projects that you're looking to spend money on, in my world, nice-to-haves as well. So firstly, some of you may be aware that I'm an advocate for aquatics facilities, and from a MARFUG point of view, which is the Manawatu Aquatics Facilities Users Group point of view, we are actually very grateful to have a feasibility study planned in the future which I think is in year 2. And so we're very grateful for that. And we just want to remind to say that it's essential that we'd like to see that this makes sure that it remains and that all users represented in the study across all water sports will have their say, i.e. swimming, water polo, canoe polo, triathlon, surf, who were here earlier, and that everyone gets a chance to, as I say, have that say and that their voice is taken seriously and listened to. And we'd like to make sure that we don't feel like we've been fobbed off as sometimes that we've felt in the past. Just a reminder, our facilities are old and they are past the use-by dates. And we need investment in a facility that will serve the city for the next 60 years, that is environmentally sustainable, and that obviously must be something multi-use for a number of sports and for something that all our community can have pride in. Putting my other hat on in my day job and my little business hat, we're seeing not as many businesses thriving in our city at the moment, and many business owners are struggling with increased costs, struggling with some sales, and there's a real lack of discretionary spend out there at the moment and some down trading at the moment. So I'd like us to focus on a thriving business community, one that has strong local businesses that are easy to access and that they feel supported. Many I talk to are all talking about hurdles and increased costs at the moment. We need to give our customers a reason to come to our city and not a reason to stay at home and buy online. So just to finish, and as mentioned in my plan, I just talked about the financial strain and vulnerable residents at the moment with, for example, the minimum wage that went up by 40 cents per hour. For a full-time minimum wage earner, this translates to an annual income boost of approximately $1,000 per year. And this modest gain will be obviously spent with the impending water treatment levy alone, let alone the increase of the rates. So just be mindful that hopefully the economic times will improve in the future and that we'll have some more prosperity in the future, but mindful of what we need to be spending our money on at the moment as well. So that's all I have to say at the moment, and feel free for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for coming in, Jeff. Appreciate your ongoing commitment to this. I had a question from your written submission, then you repeated the same phrase about our swimming pools being past their use-by date. What's the use-by date on a swimming pool?
Great question. I would suggest that 65, and it's not just the use-by date. I'd also like to preface the fact that they're only, for example, the Lido 50-metre pool, it's not available for water polo, it's not available, suitable for canoe polo, it's shut for most of the year. In fact, I think we've had a good summer, the fact that it's only just shut recently, which was a first for a long time. It's normally 3 to 4 months that the thing is open. So therefore, whilst we get extra capacity in those 3 to 4 months, most of the year that thing sits empty. And then that puts strain on our indoor pools. So the last pool, the John Bolt Memorial Pool, was built in 1981. Again, that's not fit for almost anything. We can't hold swimming competitions in it. It's just basically a lap pool, and there hasn't been a lot of investment in that part of the Lido and that facility for a long, long time. Same thing with the Freiburg, and I'm aware that the pool that we're based in at Palmerston North Boys High School is facing some upgrades coming up shortly as well.
So it's more that the aquatic world has moved on and those facilities were of their era.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, good, thank you. And then my second question, if I could, about your comments about the seismic upgrades of landmark facilities, and I appreciated the thought you'd put in to that. I just wanted to check with you. So you said, you're supportive of the concept, would appreciate further transparency and stakeholder engagement. So I just want to check with you that you're aware that the programme the next 3 years is basically to do that stakeholder engagement. Yep. Does that sit well with you?
Yeah, it does, and it's kind of like we're spending a lot of money on a number of different libraries, and is it all those libraries we need to spend money on, or is it better to put that investment into one area and maybe bring more people into town? And that's why I talk about, what are we going to do to bring more people into town more often?
Yes, so the landmark facilities, I think that you were commenting on there about Te Manawa and the Central Library.
Yeah,
yes.
and in that area, so like to my little world, that creates a vibrant inner city, which is what I like to see.
Lovely, thanks for your support for that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Zabel.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Jeff. You said in your written submission there are some concerns around that we might be prioritising wrongly perhaps with Arena 5 and a field realignment. If you were spending that 36 million in sports in Palmerston North, where would you want to see that put?
Let me guess. Okay, shall I go into it?
Apart from a poll.
I've only got 3 minutes. Obviously, in my area, that would be best spent for aquatics, and I think we talked about in the surf thing there were 5,000 preventions. All you have to do is come along to any school swimming sports to see kids can't swim. And we have a real problem with learn to swim, and a big part of that is we don't have lane space access. So in my world, that's a real priority.
Thank you. And we've had lots of groups advocating for us for different facilities. So I'm interested in what's the facility you're advocating for. How comparatively, how would you say that was a need compared to a want, which is terms we've heard a lot today?
Yeah, and I think that has been a recurring theme, hasn't it? So again, where I come from, it's a need for people to be confident in the water, and it's not just aquatic sports that, obviously the sports side of it, that gains healthy youth, and it we get a competitive element around it as well. And we've got some people from the aquatics community in the last 2 to 3 years in this region who have over-exceeded on a national level. We've lost some to other regions because we don't have the facilities to keep them going. But it's providing confident swimmers, people who, when they can go into Awa, when they go out to the ocean, are confident in the water. Because New Zealand sort of, unfortunately, bats highly in the drowning statistics.
Great. Thank you very much.
The Mayor.
Thanks, Mr Chair. Thanks, Jeff. Good to see you. In our LTP, and you don't mention it in your submission, and maybe it's an oversight, you do mention the pool feasibility, and you've commented on that. But what about the Learn to Swim program, for the under fives, and the community pool fund? Do you back those?
I don't think from our swimming perspective, I don't think we see a return on that. There's certainly there's a heavy reliance on families going off to swim schools to get their kids to a certain point. The under 5 thing, I think we don't see any benefit from our end in that when they're coming through to us.
Okay. What about the community pool fund, which a number of other cities have done?
Which is the school pools and...
Yeah, and community pools, yeah.
Again, a lot of our community pools aren't usable for the whole year for the sport. They're only open in the summer times and so forth. There's not too many that are covered that we could use full time, and not a lot we could use in a sporting sense because they're not the right dimensions and the right size. We'd love to be able to use them more, but they're not available to us at the moment.
So is that wasted for the competitive part of the sport?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Different to the advice we got. Thanks.
Yep. Happy to talk to you about it some more too, anytime.
Thank you, Jeff. That's all the questions we've got for you this evening. Really appreciate you coming in and speaking to us. And
my pleasure. Thank you.
As I've said before, your submission will be considered alongside all the others at the end of the month.
Thank you.
I'd now like to welcome our final submission for the night, number 983, Peter Gray, and I believe Susan Beatty.
Kia ora tātou councillors. I'm very aware we're your last customer tonight, so we'll try and make it as short as possible for you. Now we're here representing the Housing Advice Centre, and so it'll be no surprises to you around the areas that I'm showing support for. And I'll just run through those quickly. I need to put these on so I can clearly read what I'm put down. So we certainly support the development and implementation of the local housing first model, the outreach support and the quick response fund to support people to retain their rental housing. From my point of view and also our committee's point of view, we certainly see this this initiative in its design should be based on the whānau ora and collective impact modelling. And we would certainly want to see engagement with both iwi and council around that design work, but also with ongoing leadership in it. This actually creates an opportunity for us to look at co-designing a Housing First initiative that is best for our community and how it links with our community-based assets that we already have. Naturally, I housing advice, sorry, strongly support the building of new social housing and council's leadership and further development development opportunities. Also support the development of community to provide new housing developments and more diverse forms of housing. But I do see these developments will need to have a component of affordable housing options and also builds that take in universal design. One thing that we need to look at when we look at the whole housing sector issues that we have is that we need to look across the whole continuum of housing. We could look at it at the front end where we're looking at people going into transitional housing, but if you haven't got those next steps for them, you're getting that roadblock sitting with transitional housing. The next area that I wanted to talk about was around community support plan. And once again, these will come as no shock to anyone about how we are supporting these. Certainly support the Council's ongoing support and commitment to the overall community and the community organisations and initiatives that work to support and develop our community's resilience, well-being and growth. Now, you've got to take that into a context that this is not just purely a social capital investment that you're putting in there. It actually has an economic on-flow as well, because you're not only creating a healthy community, you're creating a healthy workforce for our businesses, but also a healthy marketplace for our businesses to sell to. But council needs to certainly understand the pressures that community services are facing now. Not only with the increase in demand, but the increase in complexity of need, but also more recently, financially, the increase in service provision costs, including recruitment and retention of skilled staff. These are battles that each small organisation and even not so small organisation continue to actually face. I hope that the Council continues to work alongside communities and organisations to seek solutions that support the ongoing delivery of these vital services. I'll now pass over to Susan, who will talk about the sector lead and HAC's request for increased funding.
Thank you, Peter, and good evening, councillors. As Peter said, a lot of us small community organisations are struggling with the increased costs, and as you as councillors are aware, the waiting list for housing has not decreased. It's getting higher and higher, and the demands are more complex. And since COVID, a lot more people are angrier, and they're getting pushed from, MSD from one place to another, and we as Housing Advice Centre seem to end up being the final place where people can go. And when you've only got a very small team of, we should have 3 people, but the problem is we've been having problems recruiting. Also, we've now got health and safety issues. When you've got somebody on annual leave and you've only got 2 in the office and one wants to go to lunch and you've got issues with, some of the clients they're having, we just cannot now have one person in an office. So this is where we're struggling to be able to maintain our services and health and safety. And we're now having to pay for extra costs for training, for example, de-escalation type training and this sort of thing. I mean, I don't have to go on and on. I mean, just want to be straight up. We've asked for 21,000 plus, isn't it, Peter, every year. So please consider this and we'd like a positive outcome if possible. Thank you.
I'd just like to put that into context. The money that we're asking for is actually only the amount that we applied for to do the strategic priority grants, not the amount that we actually got allocated. Okay, and that money that's invested in only covers one role, one housing advisor role. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr Chair. Thanks, Peter and Susan. We've had a few requests from different community organisations to increase community funding in general. I'm interested in your, I guess, opinion as to whether the sorts of demands that your organisation is under are seen across the sector, or whether you think it might be just specific to your organisation.
I would say that it is across the sector. I know with the work that I do, working with the disabled community, the waiting list to get any counselling support services is just getting longer and longer.
And if I could just add, Councillor Johnson, since I have not been a councillor but involved in the community, I've had in a lot of organisations ringing me just as you're somebody who knows the ropes, can you help us? So there's a lot of them really struggling.
Okay, so that supports basically what we've been hearing from other organisations, that it's a general cross-sector need.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you both. Just be interested in a bit more information around your comments. You've said that you support the building of new social housing and also the development community to provide new housing developments and more diverse forms of housing. Just interested to understand what you mean by the diverse forms of housing, and also just interested in your perspective about whether our social housing, we're looking, you know, there's the potential for community housing providers or trusts to be able to make social housing more financially sustainable for us in terms of attracting the income-related subsidy, and whether you would support us moving, you know, exploring different models to find a more financially sustainable way to provide the social housing. Okay. Sorry, there's probably two questions there. But.
I think if you look at the housing trust model, I'm going back in history, but I'm recalling that we had looked at this some years ago within council, and the issue is that the council then lost control over how that housing could be used, and that was a risk. Equally, if you getting that subsidy from the government, you're then going to lose control over about who is going into your housing, and that then creates a risk of what the mix is like in your housing complexes. Got that out. And then you've got to actually reflect that, how does that impact on your existing tenants within your housing? Because as soon as the person gets a feeling of feeling unsafe, it stops being a home. Okay? It becomes accommodation only. And that's something you need to be wary of, particularly with people who I know council focuses on the low-income elderly, but also people with disabilities, and they become quickly potential victims, if you like, if you get that mix wrong.
Thank you, Peter. I appreciate you asked two questions right at the end there, so you might have an opportunity to connect with Councillor Naylor afterwards. Thank you for going in. That's all the time we've got today and presenting to us. And as with all others, it'll be considered alongside the rest of our submissions and our May deliberations. Right, councillors, we've made it. I'll now adjourn the meeting until Friday the 17th of May, session 11 at 9 a.m. And I will note it's Pink Shirt Day tomorrow, so if those of you are interested, just a reminder there. And we'll look to close our... you lose a step ahead, Councillor Finlay. And I will look to close our meeting with karakia. Kia pute, ki te whau, ki te ao marama, whakamoa kia tēnā. Haumie, huie, tā kie. Thank you, Councillor.